So when you think about how we make decisions in our society, for example, voting for president or for a referendum, have you ever wondered, really? Is this the best we can do? Even with what we think are the best democratic processes in place, the results still don't seem to be optimal. Democracy is the middle path between chaos and an inability to coordinate on one hand, and authoritarian rulers on the other, where the control emerges from the will of the governed. We shouldn't take it for granted, but we also shouldn't think it's something fixed in stone. There are many ways to do democracy, and I'll present strong evidence in this video suggesting that the problems we're encountering in our democracies are largely due to the details of how we run things, like the voting systems we use. If we're not happy with the results we're getting, it's time to tweak the process. Hi, I'm Sam Scheikowitz, the founder of Forby.org. In this video, I want to share what I've discovered about our voting systems. A few areas I'll dive into include the most commonly used single-choice voting methods, why they fail, and voting systems that actually make sense: approval, ranked choice, and score voting. And finally, I'll talk about how these voting systems are integrated into Forby.org, the software that I'm developing to help groups collect, develop, and prioritize the ideas of their members. So voting is a natural human behavior. Hunter-gatherer tribes are known to do it, and the first recorded system of governance to use voting was in ancient Athens around 2,500 years ago. I've had the opportunity to speak with a few of the most famous mathematicians who study the science of voting, like Richard Darlington from Cornell University, the mathematician Pietro Speroni de Finizio, and Richard Forbes, the vote fair guy. And according to them, we're definitely doing it wrong in most democratic countries. What's so wrong, you might ask? Well, let's dive in. But first, before voting happens, a political system could be judged on how the crafting of ideas and proposals and how the nominating of candidates happens. A famous election rigger from the late 1800s named Boss Tweed was quoted as saying, "I don't care who does the electing, so long as I get to do the nominating." Well, voting can give people a chance to feel involved, but in most countries, it's just a checkbox exercise, voting for voting's sake, instead of making any real decisions. The options themselves are already not so good. It's a case of garbage in, garbage out. Having said that, once options are available, not all methods of picking a winner are equal. Voting systems are susceptible to various flavors of unfairness. Let's start with the one used for most elections in most countries, and one of the least favorites among mathematicians: single-choice voting. Single-choice voting, as the name suggests, requires you to pick only one of a list of options. Within single-choice voting, plurality is the simplest version, where the winner is the one with the most votes, like US, Canadian, British, and Indian legislative elections. Another version is called majority rule, as in the US presidential elections. The winner has to get over 50% of the votes, otherwise a contingency plan has to be called in. There are 4 flavors of unfairness with single-choice voting, and as I explain them, I think you're going to recognize how much these unfairnesses affect our political landscapes. The first is split the vote spoilers and the lesser of two evils. So if there are 2 options that are both loved by most voters and one that's preferred by a smaller group, the 2 popular options can split the vote, leaving the less popular option as the winner. In majority rule voting, like US presidential elections, there are always only 2 viable establishment options, and there's no diversity of candidates representing a viable third party. Third-party candidates can't be viable because if they win a significant number of votes, they'll either destroy the chances of the major party that they're most similar to, or with enough votes make it impossible for any candidate to win a majority. For this reason, in single-choice elections, we're always hearing people say they're voting for someone they don't like because they're the lesser of two evils. Well, we're all voting for someone we don't like, and not voting for any option we really do like, because we see our favorites as unwinnable. And if we don't vote for the winner, our votes are wasted. So what do I mean by our votes are wasted? Well, that's the second flavor of unfairness: winner takes all and wasted votes. In single choice voting, the preferences of those who don't vote for the winner don't provide any weight or information as they do in systems where voters rank or score their preferences. These wasted votes are what make gerrymandering so easy to do, which is when a political party hacks the system in their favor, rearranging the districts so their candidates have razor-thin victories in most districts and major losses in a few. The third type of unfairness is the apathy of approving losers. Under plurality, many people feel that voting is an empty ritual. An option that's despised by most of the population can win, as long as its approval percentage is higher than the other ones. And finally, the bad math. So single choice is a simple and intuitive counting system. It's most likely the one used by ancient tribes and Athenians. And it's okay mathematically when there are only two choices, and people have to select one. Once there are more than two options, like elections with multiple candidates or multiple options, single choice systems start to fail mathematically. I'll go through an example of 15 people who are asked to rank their preference for mangoes, strawberries, and grapefruit. 6 of them rank them like this: first, grapefruit; second, mangoes; third, strawberries. 5 voters rank it like this: first, strawberries; second, mangoes; third, grapefruit. And 4 voters rank them like this: first, mangoes; second, strawberries; and third, grapefruit. A minority of 6, or 40%, liked grapefruit the most, but most candidates, 9 out of 15, 60%, ranked it last. In a majority system, there would be no winner, because nothing was over 50%. But in plurality, the outcome is simple. Grapefruit wins with 6 out of 15, 40% of the vote, followed by strawberries with 5, or 33%, and mangoes trailing last with 4 voters, 27%. So, do voters actually prefer grapefruit? Not at all. Why? I'll show you for sure, comparing the results with each of the 3 voting systems that actually make sense: approval voting, ranked choice, and score voting. Approval voting. Approval voting has been used by the cardinals to approve the Pope since the 13th century, and it's used by the UN to approve the Secretary General. In this method, voters vote to approve or reject each option. In this way, voters can vote with their conscience, approving every candidate that they believe to be a viable option. This makes it good for moderate candidates who appeal to both left and right. The option with the most approvals is the winner, and if needed, the election can select a number of winners. So the results show all of the candidates who got enough approvals to pass, and the rank of the candidates from the first to the last. Approval voting is also handy when choosing many options, for example, what plants to plant in a family garden. Back to our fruit example, let's assume that the voters approve their first 2 choices and reject their third option. So 6 approve grapefruit and mangoes and reject strawberries. 5 voters approve strawberries and mangoes and reject grapefruit. And 4 voters approve mangoes and strawberries and reject grapefruit. When we add it up, we get grapefruit, 6 approvals, strawberries, 9 approvals, and mangoes unanimously approved with 15 votes. This is the exact reverse of what the single choice voting system produced. If grapefruit had won, 9 of the 15 voters, 60%, would have been unhappy. Does this sound familiar? On the other hand, the risk of approval voting is that people may choose to reject all but their favorite, gambling that the strength of their preference for the first choice is worth sacrificing the chances for their second or third choices. So this is not ideal, but the gain made by strategic voting is not actually that much, and it puts the voters' secondary preferences at risk. In the worst case scenario, we're back to single choice voting, and in most scenarios, more people are happy with the choice. Ranked choice voting. Also known as counter set voting or pairwise method, ranked choice is calculated by looking at pairs of options, like grapefruits versus mangoes, to see how many voters preferred each fruit against each other fruit. Variations of ranked choice are used in Australia, Ireland, New Zealand, Malta, and Scotland. This method was developed during the French Revolution, and it's a little more complicated mathematically. Ranked choice gathers a lot of information about voter preferences, and so it tends to find more centrist options that most people approve, like approval voting. And it's less able to be manipulated than any other of the voting systems. So this makes it ideal for large public elections and votes. Back to our fruit example. When you remove mangoes and only look at grapefruits versus strawberries, you see that 40% prefer grapefruit, but 5 plus 4, or 9 of the 15 voters, 60%, prefer strawberries to grapefruits. When you remove strawberries, you see that 60% also prefer mangoes to grapefruit, clear majorities in both cases. Meanwhile, 10 of the 15 voters, 6 plus 4, or 67%, prefer mangoes to strawberries. By pairing off these preferences, we see the true order to be mangoes first, strawberries second, and grapefruits last. The same as the approval voting, and again, the exact reverse of what the single choice voting system produced. So while ranked choice provides pretty good subtlety, and it's less prone to manipulation than any of the other voting systems in the case of large anonymous public elections, it doesn't work so well when compromise and soft preferences need to be considered. So, for example, people rating the chances of success of 3 different plans, or 3 friends choosing what topping to order for pizza. So in that case, 2 like pepperoni most, and mushrooms a close second, and the 3rd friend's a vegetarian. Obviously, if they're really friends, they'll accommodate the needs of the vegetarian, but only score voting can handle this really well. In score voting, voters give each option a score. In our case, we're going -5 to 5. This means that in addition to providing information about the order of preference, voters are able to give information about the strength of the preference. Scoring an option 1 and another option 2 means a weak preference, while scoring one option -5 and the other option 5 is a very strong preference. The scores are added, and the option with the highest total wins. So back to our fruit example, let's assume that, like many divisive options, people who like grapefruit really love it, and people who don't like it really don't like it. 6 rank them like this: grapefruit 5, mangoes 3, strawberries 2. 5 rank them like this: strawberries 5, mangoes 4, grapefruit -3. And 4 rank them like this: mangoes 5, strawberries 3, grapefruit -4. When you add up all the points, you get mangoes 58, strawberries 49, and grapefruit -1. Again, the same order as the other 2 methods, and the exact reverse of what the single choice voting system produced. And again, if grapefruits had won, a majority of voters would walk away unhappy. Because score voting's sensitivity to the strength of preference, it's very sensitive to voters who are willing to give all the options except their favorite a low score in order to get their top pick. So for this reason, score voting is not typically used in large, anonymous public elections. However, small groups with a significant level of trust and who have to make decisions with a lot of subtlety might want to use score voting as their option. So that completes our tour of voting systems. You can see that many of the complaints we have with our political systems might actually be the result of the actual voting systems we're using. And these complaints might totally disappear if we made that change. Deciding how our voting systems work in our democracies is an area where an upgrade is due. And it would result in much better choices and much happier citizens. So what does it look like to integrate all 3 of these systems? Well, that's exactly what we've done with Forby.org. Forby is a way for groups, large and small, to collect, develop, and prioritize the ideas of their members. The main purpose of Forby is the crafting of ideas and proposals, and deciding what candidates are suited to any given position. Members can use our advanced voting system to come up with the best solutions or best candidates. So here's the interface that we're using. The options on the top, 5th through 1st, are all approvals, and -5th through -1st at the bottom are all rejections. The numbers are also simultaneously ranked and scored. This interface allows us to run approval, rank choice, and score voting simultaneously every time a voter votes. So a large community with little trust could rely on the rank, and small communities could rely on the score. Community administrators set the quorum and approval percentages. And so the results of the vote shows whether the option passes the community's approval percentage. This is an example results page. You can see the vote tally at the bottom. And here you can see your vote. You can see the rank, the score, and the approval rating. Now you can like an idea, but not think it's a high priority. So prioritization is separate. As Forby grows and users get more comfortable with a more detailed voting system, coupled with finding that better voting systems produce better decisions, people may pressure governments to switch away from the single choice voting. If you find this topic interesting, like the video and subscribe to the channel. And you can go to forby.org to sign up and use our software. It's free to use, and it's going to allow you and any groups you're part of, from family and friends to businesses, associations, boards, co-ops, and startups, to make better decisions. Thanks so much for watching. And a special thanks to Richard Darlington, Pietro Speroni de Finizio, and Richard Phobes for taking the time to help me understand the details of voting math.